All right, hey, welcome back. This is part two. We had just so much content that we wanted to make sure we were able to get through it all and give you guys everything that we had. So last time we talked about a number of topics. So we kicked off with some of the concerns and benefits and positions and hurdles to go through. So kind of laying the groundwork for working remotely and setting expectations and guidelines. I think is definitely one of the bigger one, and we'll get into some more of that today. A really great one around meetings. So we talked a lot about meetings and what those would be, and we capped off with tools. If we have time, I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper because we just kind of flew through all of those. But today I want to start out with maintaining culture, because I think that is probably one of the potentially more difficult pieces, and I think the piece that people are struggling with, even though they might not know that they're struggling with the maintaining of the culture. All right, so maintaining culture is a little bit different in a remote environment because you're not next to everybody every day. But one thing that I advise for is to bring a sense of professionalism. I say that as I'm wearing a t-shirt, but bring a sense of professionalism to the environment, to your calls, to everything that you do. When we talk about remote, I think a lot of people just are talk about I'm dressed from here down, and then it's all pajamas. You can do that, but just know that what you do kind of sets the tone for everything. Especially if you're a leader, you should be looking to dress for the job you want. You're still doing that, and there's a reason for it. Is because as you transition between rooms, between areas and spaces, you need to kind of shift your mindset from, hey, I'm a mom or a dad, to, hey, I have a team of 6 that I need to make sure that they're on point and doing the things, and they have what they need and resources that they need. And for me, clothing and attire absolutely helps. So for me, 7 a.m., I take a shower, get dressed, do the whole bathroom ritual, and then come into the office, and then I'm on. And on the way, I do the goodbye to the family, and I'm in my office, the door's closed, and everybody knows that when daddy's door is closed, then it's office time. Yeah, Kirsten, what kind of things do you do to get in state and to set the tone?
Yeah, my day is a little bit more flexible than Justin's typically. So for my situation, I actually use the environment as my, I guess, winding up to my focus level. And I certainly keep a culture around my day, but it might not look exactly the same as take a shower, get dressed, and go to work. Because I still have I work at different hours, so I might have my family time prior to having my calls, or any work commitment that I might have. So for me, actually, I sort of so anybody who doesn't know me, I have a travel lifestyle. My family and I move houses or locations somewhere between a week to a month at a time right now. So in my current situation, I actually do my work upstairs and everything else is done downstairs. So for me, as I walk up those stairs, I start to set my mind and I start to get in the mode. This is where I'm going. This is the meeting I'm about to have. And then I set up my computer and I start to focus in that way. So for me, it's not as much about the ritual of my clothes or my makeup, but that adds to it, certainly when I'm having video calls. But more for me, a ritual around moving into a space where I'm focused and I'm thinking about work rather than my family. It's I think traditionally, men are often very compartmentalized with their, mentality. And I think I have a lot of that too. So I kind of step out of my role as a mom or as a wife or whatever that looks like. Just like Justin was describing with walking down the hall and closing the door and, closing off that space. And I do that same thing. So for me, that's a factor in me kind of creating my own culture that I can project to my team or to my coworkers, or just set that professionalism right from the start.
Yeah, I love the idea of the space because you said that, and yeah, coming down the hallway into the office, like separated enough. I don't know if you guys can hear the kids going crazy outside having a blast because it's the evening and they're cooped up and letting loose. But yeah, it sets a transition, and it's interesting because when I worked in an office, when I had the drive and the commute, that was sort of like a me time where I was listening to podcasts or music, or that was a transition. And when you're remote, like you're all on, and then you're all on, and the end of the hallway is just not enough time to move into that other space, that other mindset. It, Definitely something to think about. It's something that my wife and I have talked about, of like how to more easily transition to family time, because especially coming out of a very regimented, all go from the office to, go outside, and like, hey, they're not in the same mindset, the same pace. So to give them the space and to make sure I have the space to make that transition. And then conversely, when I go out to lunch and come back, often I'm doing a completely separate project, a different headspace, and to have those tools and mechanisms. So I have a YouTube playlist of videos that I find really motivating. And so if I'm going from one type of headspace to, let's say, a demo or a sales presentation, I'll watch a couple of videos that just really get me excited and motivated to be helping people and serving them. And so that really helps me to mentally change into those spaces. And that way, when I'm in meetings, I can show up as the person that I want to be in that meeting, and control that emotion a little bit better.
So another aspect of culture that is almost the reverse of what we just talked about is actually making yourself approachable to your team who's remote, because you might not have the same kind of interaction as if you were in person. And so for me, I actually kind of go through two scenarios. One, I get into my professional mindset, but then I also think about what is the interaction that I'm about to have, and do I want to create a relationship, or do I want to just focus on the tasks? I am extremely good at focusing on tasks, and I can get into any meeting and set the tempo where we are following an agenda and going from step to step and getting our work done and then getting out. I'm so strong at that. However, for me, I actually have to consciously think, what is my intention with this meeting, and what is my intention with the people? What relationships do I want to build with my team, so that way I can not only be successful in this specific meeting or instance, but then create a culture that proliferates for the future, and creates that culture that allows my teammates or my team to be successful and have relationships as well. So I actually go through that mental space where I'm thinking, okay, do I want to check in and see how so-and-so's kid is doing, because I know they were sick yesterday. Simple little things that make a huge difference in making the culture approachable and building those relationships. So that's kind of the opposite, actually, of what we were talking about a minute ago.
Yeah, and leading further down that path, I mean, we talked about a couple ideas. The last one on meetings. We've been doing a couple of virtual happy hours, which has been really nice. It was, I'm in a remote team, and we had somebody that was leaving for another opportunity. So we had a virtual happy hour to say goodbye, and we've all kind of agreed. It was awkward. It was very, surreal to be in that situation, because we have developers and sales and the professional service, project managers all in a room, a virtual room. And it's like, everybody's used to a different scenario. And so it was interesting to see those personalities come out and flourish a little bit. And we all agreed that we wanted to continue with it. Some other things that I heard of, we haven't implemented yet, are like a morning coffee meeting. So just like an open forum, an open meeting room that's designated for that if you have time, if you want to, you can go in and just, talk about things, and no real expectation around it, and no requirement to be there. It's there if you need it. Those virtual happy hours are great.
Can I tell you
somebody,
a story?
yeah, yeah.
Talking about the morning coffee versus virtual happy hour and having that video conference where you're actually able to see and connect with somebody. It's so different than just talking to them on the phone or even having meetings that don't have video attached. A couple years ago, I led a team that was half in Baltimore and half in Wisconsin. And it was a team where we were moving an entire production line from one site to another. And so
Wow.
I led the entire project. It was super successful, but it was really funny to me. I remember I had only had phone conversations with my team that was in Wisconsin. And because the accent was different, I had this image in my head of what each person looked like. And for whatever reason, the Wisconsin accent to me seemed like little old men and little old ladies. And when I actually was in person with each of the team members, or when I saw them, they looked completely different than what I expected. They had completely different social lives and, situations. Like the one guy who I thought was a little old man, he was like the most buff hockey player I've ever met. And it was so, it takes you by surprise sometimes. For me, it took me by surprise. So I just wanted to, enhance or elaborate upon that, like having that visual aspect where you can build that relationship in a different way and also just put that personality to the person definitely makes a huge difference. So we had a great team and I just really enjoyed getting to know them with that extra dimension of the visual that makes a huge difference in that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I know one of the concerns is webcam versus no webcam, and most people lean towards no webcam because it, it aids in their comfort. A lot of people are less like, hey, I'm going to get on the internet and just share my video with everybody. And I know that is a leap for sure. But on the other side of it, just to say and make a requirement to do webcams, it can seem overbearing, and you can absolutely do it in a creepy way. So don't, think about it things before
We
you say
discourage that.
it. Yeah, do not do that. But the other side of that is, I know we did lose somebody who, recently, who just felt disconnected from everything. And so one of the things that I was trying to do is, make sure that the rest of us were on camera so she could see us and kind of feel more engaged, because she was feeling, working remotely, there is an isolation that comes with it. And I don't think anybody really understood until the last couple of weeks where, it became a reality for a lot of people. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm stuck in these four walls, like they're closing in on me. And so it is actually a really good tool for that. So it can be broached in a really helpful manner, collaborative manner. And to do that, one of the things we did, we didn't necessarily do it. He did it himself, self-proclaimed chief joy officer, who's now organizing all of these fun events and making these things a reality, which is a lot of fun. And it's great that we have somebody who just has that spirit and the drive to make that happen and to create that culture. So I really applaud him for leading the charge in that and for stepping up and creating that space.
Truthfully, I would say, if you're leading a team and you recognize that someone has a natural inclination to that, that is one of the best things to foster. There are certainly people who are not comfortable with that, but having an individual who wants to take charge in the spirit development and just creating that space that is a little bit more fun. If you foster that, that creates a culture that helps the entire team grow and develop and connect. So I would say that's like one of the biggest things about remote work that is hard, is that you are isolated sometimes, and some of that fun stuff doesn't happen. The morale is sometimes harder to just boost. And having someone who is engaging in that way and wants to do it just as an additional benefit can make a big difference in your team's productivity and morale overall.
Oh yeah. And like any other part of leadership, if you can delegate something to somebody, Absolutely.
Do
If
it.
somebody's stepping up to do that and take it off of your plate, you will not suffer for too little to do, especially now. I know I'm overwhelmed almost. Um, I want to call it another idea, but they had a Friday highs and lows for the week. So to come in and do that. And within Meet Inc. CEO, we're going to go through a lot of them. So look at Level Up to CEO group on Facebook, and we'll be posting some stuff in there, I'm sure. But within Meet Inc. CEO, we talk about a couple different meeting formats and some layouts of what those would be, and slides for running those types of meetings. So there's a lot of different things to do. But just having a high and low is a way to weekly get together and say, what went well, what didn't, and have a place for that type of communication would be really good. Make sure you're celebrating the wins, even to this customer stories. Like right now is a really interesting time where entire supply chains are affected. Almost, a lot of times very, very negatively. So to be able to share a win that your customer had makes the day feel like you've really done something. This morning or this weekend, I got an email from an owner of a company that it turns out that one of their customers is really involved and has actually a couple of them that in coronavirus, and they are creating the things that are doing the lab testing. So one of them just got approved, and that's going out to hospitals here shortly. A device that can do testing in 45 minutes. So some really, really cool things. And it's really grateful to hear like, hey, we're a part of something that's, on the front lines. And, what does that mean for us? And what does it mean for other things? And how can we help other businesses succeed because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Connecting, a big part of the culture, I feel like, is connecting to the vision of the organization as well. And that's what Justin was really speaking to. I've had the opportunity to work in hospitals and medical manufacturing, and it's really neat to have your vision so clear that that you're helping people. But I've worked in manufacturing sites where we're not producing anything that's medical at all, but knowing that your customer is still benefiting from your services and being reminded of that really helps you stay focused and understand why you're coming to work each day. And that enhances your culture all around, for sure.
Yeah, I remember one company I worked with were manufacturers, and I was struggling I basically recreated their entire internet presence and showed them how they could do it in this new way. This was back 2008. Web 2.0 was coming around and doing stuff. And I asked them if they had any testimonials, and they're like, well, not really. We just have these customer stories. And so this is back before this was very digital. And so they had this huge file cabinet full of letters with photos of people doing their own projects. I'm like, how are you not highlighting this? These people are so passionate. They're taking pictures on a camera, having the film developed, sending it with a stamp to you. And
that should be spread across all the walls.
Right? Yeah, I would love to see that. It would drive that passion for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the vision and the mission and that type of alignment should be pervasive in kind of everything you do, not just to keep everybody in line, but or going to the same direction. But something that I'm a huge advocate for is a single source of truth. And so if we're always looking to that one thing and like a true north compass, and if we're all going to the same systems to get the one answer, that just means that it's so much easier. And right now is a great time for that, where before I've seen a lot of companies live in their inbox and have all of these, the answers to a question in their computer in some weird spot, and they just have to get called every time something comes up. When we go remote, it's a really good opportunity to start finding tools and resources to put that together. And is that SharePoint? Is it Confluence? One of these tools where you can put everything that everybody can have access to and say, this is the CRM that has all of our customers in it. This is the standard operating procedures for everything within the company, and figure out how to lock certain areas down and start having those conversations now, so you can maintain that single source of truth and not have to ask a bunch of different people. It might be.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it might be easy when you're all working in the same building to like, okay, this person doesn't have it and run over here. This person doesn't have it and run over here. This person has it. Okay, good. But if you're online, it's just such a pain to try to physically track something down. If it's digital all in one spot, it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Almost every environment that I've been in, the key thing that I focus on with teams, or one of the first things that I focus on, is standardizing and documenting. And in almost every environment, there's like that knowledge that just gets, grown throughout time, but doesn't get documented. And when it comes to virtual work, that is one of the best things that you can do for your team, is to start documenting everything. In a lot of teams, once you hit something virtual, there's more turnover. And that is sometimes a factor of having a little bit more isolation. Sometimes it's a factor of the fact that not all teams feel very connected and feel like they're directly in line with like the need or the vision of the organization. But the teams that are most successful, one, are able to document what they're doing and are easily able to train people to come into that environment. But then also, when you're connecting with other people and you're able to document what each person is doing and how that aligns and how you can standardize that, then people feel more valued because their input is going into the scenario, which ultimately reduces the turnover. So I would highly recommend like making that a part of your culture, is creating that environment where people are able to standardize and document what they're doing, and then create best practices out of it and feel valued because of their contributions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite places to start with that is around task and project management. So, everybody knows exactly where to go to find out what they need to do that day, what they're expected to come out with. And every meeting, every agenda item, it is all housed in something that makes it very easy, and they only have to go into one system to find it. I know it's very common to, maybe you have your own paper and then this person said this in the meeting, and so that's in the meeting notes for this, but this other person does. Just wrap it all up into, something. Even if it's only one system for your team and you or somebody in your team owns that translation to make sure that that's always up to date, but just have one system so your team members know how to get into it, know what their expectation is, and make sure that there's enough licenses around. I did work, one of my biggest success stories was going into a team that had 6 licenses for their project management or task management, and there were 25 people. So nobody could be in it at the same time. And the amount of extra work that created was just far more expensive than the cost of the extra licenses. A lot of these things are like $5 a user per month. You spend like $100 a day trying to track this stuff down.
Wasting that extra time of your expensive team members.
Yeah. That's
a big win.
Yeah, we had a project manager come to us, and he wanted to get another project tool because the one we were at only allowed us to do like X many projects. And we're like, well, where are you, what exactly is the problem? It's like, oh, well, we have these other projects that are coming in, and so I need a place to put them, but this one's capped out. It's like, it was, I think, $15 a month for all of our users to have access to, like another 10 projects. It's just, I'll put the $10 in. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Make it easy. Cool. So, in the communication line, tone is something that's really interesting because everything's digital. In the places where you're not having a face-to-face meeting, and you're not having a camera meeting, being able to effectively communicate is a new skill set. People might be used to text or email or SMS or IMs, but just to make sure that that's, the culture is preserved there. Some people talk about emojis, people like them, some people don't. And I would say lean into the company culture and how they're perceived there. And you can have your own subculture within your team, but to set an expectation and let people know of, maybe the smiley face emoji is okay, but the poopy emoji probably shouldn't be on a work email to a client. Those types of things that you might not think that you need to set guardrails around yet, but when you go remote, that become just more pervasive into the culture.
Yeah, I would also say get to know your team members. It is surprising that there are, older people who are really well versed in new technology and that, I guess, slang communication when it comes to texting or emojis or whatever that looks like. And there are young people who are certainly great at that. And then I feel like there's others who usually tend towards like the 35-year-olds through 60-year-olds who are definitely not as comfortable in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
I personally am one person who doesn't love emojis, and I don't love, a lot of the different things that a lot of younger kids absolutely enjoy. But my mom and my dad are not the most tech savvy people, but they send emojis to me. Well, I think that the people who I work with, they start to get to know me and they realize that, you know what, it's okay. I have no problem with that being part of the culture, but I'm not really participating in it that much because it's just not my forte and it's not somewhere that I focus my efforts. So as a team leader, I would say just getting to know your team members on an individual level, you may set the tone that is perfectly okay to be really relaxed with your team members. But if there's that one person who isn't that comfortable, then maybe you change your dialogue with them a little bit and make it just a little bit more professional because that's what their comfort level is. So set that tone as a leader because you'll start to get to know your team members.
Yeah, and virtual environment. I really like the idea of being cognizant of how others communicate, which is, and we'll get into that a little bit in the personality profiles. But one thing that I think is important is to be understanding of people and their different areas of specialty, because I think now a technical savvy is becoming more pervasive in our society. Everybody's getting more and more used to technology. But I absolutely remember a time that wasn't too long ago where I had a particular guy I was supporting when I was in IT, and he was honest. He just flat out said, "You know what? I don't know what my password was. I went out for vacation. I came back and I thought it was something. Could you change it?" And so basically I would have to work with him and change all of his passwords, and I gave him a lot of extra care and support. But I really, really respected the guy because his area of expertise around meats, like he was one of the guys in California where he could pretty much look at a cut of meat and know what type of meat it was, that what exactly was going on, and probably even down to, by looking at the meat, know what farm it came out of. The guy was incredible at that, and he couldn't get into his email, so that would he knocked me out of the water in something else that I was utterly fascinated by. So if he couldn't get his email, it was my job as IT to make sure that he could. So definitely come at it with a little bit of humility too, that some people have expertise in other areas and that's why they're at their company. And if they can't get their email, or if they don't understand a text and you're sending them, all these different channels that might be confusing to them, just be sure to give that person the time and space to make sure that they are able to do the things that they need to do and are respected for the things that they're, their own level of brilliance, because we all have that.
I think that actually leads to a really good point. And you mentioned sending emails or text versus, any other source. You mentioned the single source of truth. I think when it comes to your virtual team environment, create that standard for where the communication is going to be. Are we emailing? Are we Zooming? Are we texting? I personally, being an expert on eliminating waste, I think it's the biggest waste ever to send my communication or someone else to send communication to multiple sources. Mm-hmm. If you're sending me an email and a text, that is number one, a duplication, but then I have to go through and read both delete at least one of them. Obviously, I'm not really deleting. I don't know. Some people delete text. I don't delete text really, but it's the time that's involved in going through that communication. Some of it could just be if you're sending multiple messages about the same thing. I think we touched on this in the last webinar, but that's a perfect opportunity to have an impromptu meeting, and that could be a Zoom, it could be a phone call, whatever makes the most sense for your team. But I just really want to remind you, focus in on that single source where your team knows this is where we're getting our information from. And then if there's too much back and forth, turn that into an actual touch point where you're communicating directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that single source of truth on the communication channels is definitely makes life a lot easier when you're going back and have to research something. You had a conversation before with somebody, you don't want to go to 5 different places. And I've definitely heard people suggest that tell them in every channel so that you're sure that they received the message. Because if everybody's on the same channel, that's not a problem.
My other pet peeve personally is when you have a group email chain where essentially, so there's a team that I've worked with that I was doing process improvement for them, and every single email that went into their department went to every person in the department, which for the supervisors, they were like, now we know everything that's going on. Yeah. However, now every person is interrupted from their job for each email that happens, in addition to the fact that the team doesn't feel trusted to handle the level of responsibility that they are responsible for. Yes, in the case that someone's on vacation, that email chain is there. However, the amount of time that people are on vacation is very small in comparison to the amount of time that people are wasting going through every single email and deleting it, or missing critical information that they're not getting because there's so much trash going into their inbox.
All the noise.
That's one noise. Thank you. So that is one area that I would encourage you to consider if you have that set up in your department. Maybe reevaluate what you do with your team members in that situation.
Or Kirsten will come down and she'll help you with that.
If you want to talk to me personally, I'm happy to talk you through that separately.
No, yeah, I've been in that situation too, and I've interfaced with teams that were like that, and it's amazing if you have the 8 waste worksheet to look through there and say, okay, let's see. So we have inventory, we have employee brilliance, which is my favorite, and it's like they just keep stacking up. You have an entire team that's handcuffed or anchored that can't move forward because everybody's sifting through this. I'll call it a dumpster fire, and if you can clear that out and let each employee be show their brilliance and shine, all those emails will probably translate to maybe 5-minute update in a weekly meeting so that everybody can still be brought up on board, but you have somebody leading it, and that's somebody who I would want more in my business anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said.
Yeah. Cool. So the other piece of that is the personality type. So my personal favorite was DISC because I'm like, it has to be simple, and DISC was about the simplest that you could ever get. So I'm a high D and high I, which is why DISC works well for me. And then the love languages was surprising because my wife and I took that test right before we got married, and we were just like, wow, this is fascinating. It's been immensely valuable to us. And as soon as I was taking it, because I was in an MBA program at the time, I was like, this is going to translate so well to an office scenario, but I cannot get a team. Please, could you read this book called The Love Language?
This is your professional assignment. Book club on the 5 languages of love.
Yeah, not to be awkward, but they did make a version for the office. It's actually very well created as well. So those are my 2 favorites. Myers-Briggs was another good one. I lean into the 16personalities.com as a free thing, so you can take it and kind of see how those work, and you can actually share it between each other and be able to see how other people react and how they would consider themselves. And then Kirsten, you had sent me the, how do you say, the Enneagram?
Yep.
Yeah. What's that
That is
one?
actually one of my favorite ones now. So an Enneagram test it's another type of personality test. And it was actually one that I found from another professional consultant. And the thing that I love about it is it kind of speaks to some of the prevailing feelings underneath of your personality. So for my husband and myself, it was really interesting because our personalities are extremely opposite, and some of the paranoia or fear that he feels or anxiety that he feels came out in the Enneagram test that he took, and that's not something that actually I have at all in my test results. So it was really interesting for me because he talks to me about fears that he has or anxieties that he has. And because I don't have that in my entire personality at all, I wasn't understanding it. And so when I actually read through his test results, and that was like a pervasive part of his personality, I started to understand him from a really different perspective. And it just, for me, was a great way to dive into what's behind the personality and kind of touch base into maybe for him what he grew up with or what was a driving force for him. But then from a professional light, it also helps show how they show up in a current professional scenario and in interaction with other people. So those were kind of some of the reasons why I've recently connected with that type of test. So
Cool. Yeah. And I think the way you phrased that too really brought another one that I don't think we listed out specifically, and it's not, I don't know if there's a test out there for it, but emotional intelligence, actually, I'm sure I've taken them, but I don't have one to send people to, but emotional intelligence of just like understanding your own emotions and why you do things and the way you do things a certain way. And as a leader, to be a grown-up and leader enough to look at how other people are interacting like you would. I compare it often to interacting with my children, because it's my job, I feel, as a leader, to look at them and their motivations and where they're coming from, to understand them so that I can better set them up for success. So not to diminish them by saying that I think of them like I do my kids, but I don't necessarily think of my normal employees as needing to have this skill set, and to be able to come to me and say, I want to do XYZ because in my all of the things that go into it. But as the person would move up, manager, I'd expect a little bit more out of them. Director, I'd expect them to be very good at separating themselves from the situation and being able to see how people are interacting and look for the reason why they're interacting in a particular way, so they can solve that problem with their own skill set as a third party, or emotionally removed from it, so it de-escalates it as much as possible. So yeah, throw emotional intelligence in there. Just the way that you phrased it, that was perfect.
Oh, thank you. The other thing I would say about emotional intelligence, the more that you understand how comfortable or how skilled your team members are in that capacity, the more successful you can be as a leader. Because with the individuals who are not as emotionally intelligently skilled, I would say, don't have that skill set as readily available to them. If you are able to see that up front, and that you have some tough things coming down the pipeline that will cause some challenges, or that other individuals might have trouble managing or dealing with, you can start to tap into them directly and help alleviate some of those challenges before they even surface. So as you get to know your team members, I think that's one of the biggest benefits to being tied into them and understanding what their emotional intelligence level is. And truthfully, if you have a couple of people, so depending on what type of team you have. If you have a couple of people who are traditionally technical or engineers who may not, I'm an engineer, just to preface it. I'm an engineer,
Ditto.
and I understand that my level of emotional intelligence is not nearly as high as maybe a psychologist or someone else a teacher maybe. But so if you know already in advance that your group isn't as strong in that area, then you can use your own skills as a leader and develop those skills to support your group in a way that you know that they might have different clashes because they're not as strong in that area. So.
Definitely. And, we touched on this probably a lot.
Please do not take that personally. I work with many of you and totally respect so many who do have that skill set. So. Yeah.
Well, and I think that specific industry, that specific skill set of the engineering mindset and so on is like really one of the reasons we came together to do this for you guys is the level up to CEO and MeInc.CEO is to support you through this, is because essentially you're getting promoted based on your ability to have your head down, crank out a lot of work, and be very analytical and see things that nobody else can see, and be able to make changes and be very dynamic. And then you're taken out of that and put in charge of others like you in that regard, but that are also head down, potentially probably not sharing a lot upwards and in that same space. And so it's almost a contracting skill set. And there's the Peter principle where you get promoted to your level of incompetence. And, I think that's going to happen no matter what industry, or where you go. When you get promoted, you will be a little bit incompetent because otherwise you have no room to grow. And that would be bad. But it's just to keep that growth mindset and to keep, yourself open to, okay, I'm in a new space. I'm have a new role, a new responsibility, a new environment that I need to adapt to and find out how I can best fit in it for my team. Part of it's going to, go back to how comfortable you in that environment. Is that something you want to continue doing? And if you like it, then to go after it like any other thing in that industry. I came from a lot of software development, and one thing that I got tired of was I hated having to learn a new version of code every time, a new language. Every couple of years something would come out, it would be completely different. Whereas other people really love that. And I know I worked with a director who was really tied to that, and it was difficult to get him out of the coding space because he loved it so much. He loved being analytical and technical and getting in there. But what his team really needed was him to show up and for him to be there with them and for him to give his knowledge to them so they could understand a framework to live in to make them all successful. So yeah, absolutely. It is definitely not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be expected. And it's actually exactly why we're here today, is to be thinking about those things and how to grow within that space and how to level up and how to think in that different CEO mindset. So you can be that technical person, the technician, to do the work, but to be able to step back and look at everything and strategize, and also be able to be that emotional leader to your team and be able to set the culture, be able to lead them through these things that brings them together and makes them far more valuable as a team than as an individual.
I love it. Absolutely.
So, and then we talked about it a lot last time, is the lead with trust. And as we're removed visually from other people, meaning I can't swing by somebody's desk and see if their head's down working on something, or if their head's down taking a nap. We don't have that. So I feel as leaders should lead with trust and go with the data. If the data is supporting that, you have a number of projects or tasks assigned to somebody and they're not being assigned, they're not being crossed off, go to them and find out, are they having an issue with it? You might find that they're having an issue just being in that space and the isolation. So it might not be them not wanting to do the work or slacking off. It's just them having trouble with the space and being able to lead them through that and be that leader to guide them.
I think that's great, just because as a leader, the things that you think of in a professional setting where everyone is working in the same space, they are so transferable to the virtual setting. And that's really what we want to focus on. Everything that you expect from a leader in person is what we want to encourage you to create virtually. So that way you can be there for your team and support them and bring them together as a community. So just like Justin was saying.
Yeah, the cracks that are easy to miss, like when you're all working together in the same room, they turn into San Andreas faults when you're going remote, and which is a perfect opportunity to come at it with these ideas that we're talking about of, leading by example, setting a culture, single source of truth, and making sure that the standard operating procedures are there to support people when you can't be there next to them physically to go through and do some of these tasks. That's the alarm for Vivian's bedtime, so I gotta go.
Perfect.
But yeah,
risk management plan. You want to
sure.
go? You gotta go.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
So
wait, hold on. Is this? I know you're going to be editing this part anyway. Is this the last thing, and then we're going to wrap up? And
yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh, or unless there's anything else you want to hit on, I'll skip the tools. My favorite.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to know the plan.
All right. So we as in the world have gotten into this situation, and I would potentially I'd say with confidence that none of us had a risk management plan for this scenario. I think this is a really good time to be.
Oh my gosh, I was so prepared for this.
Yeah, and it's funny because some of the places I was looking at, their tools and tips and techniques, they come up with this risk management plan. Yeah, why didn't you have a risk management plan for essentially everybody being quarantined at home? Because, honestly, why would you? I mean, the cost and benefit of looking at creating a risk management plan of all of a sudden everybody has to work from home is probably very remote. Although, to that said, we should have a remote worker policy. Like every business should, with office workers, with cubicle workers, should have a remote office policy of how people should interact at home, how people should, the expectation of that home office space, bandwidth, like what is the expectation there? Do they have a cell phone? Is that paid for by the company? Do they need a desk phone, a soft phone? All these different things should be thought out in advance. Even if it wasn't on a global scale, we should be able to handle, hey, somebody broke their leg, and so it's now a hardship for them to get into work. Can they work from home? So be thinking about some things that we can do to look out for things in the future. Maybe not to the umpteenth degree, but to handle some of this. So
to that point, Justin, this is a temporary situation with the coronavirus, obviously. But ultimately, I predict that it's going to create a much increased flexibility moving forward. We know already that with the millennial generation in the workforce, they've already been wanting flexibility, and they're already demanding that. And the next generation is going to want even more of that. Mm-hmm. But I think this situation where so many of the jobs that weren't even traditionally flexible are now going to have the ability to be more flexible. I think having that plan in place is going to, and creating that plan during this time is going to make a huge difference for what the workforce looks like moving forward and the standards that we set in place for any type of flexible situation moving forward.
Absolutely. And this is, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people who I listen to always talk about the billionaires are made in the recessions and in the downturns. And I think this is one of those times where, as the leaders who step up and who can show people how to set up these systems and can lead from the front and be the person that people can go to, rather than spreading a lot of fear mongering, but being there to spread, okay, this is a challenge like any other challenge we face. How do we go about it? And to have a paradigm and a framework for handling challenges so that it reduces the time to pivot. It allows you to make those moves and those transitions faster because you have a really, really good framework on how to make that shift and that change. And that's one of the things that we bring to you with Me Inc. CEO. So definitely be looking for that Facebook group, Level Up to CEO, for some of those things that Kirsten has brought in, and from the Kaizen and the Lean Six Sigma to show you how you can take challenging situations or things that aren't the ideal and turn those into just amazing results in an incredible amount of time.
Yep. And that's, Justin, you hit on it. If you have the process to follow to make that happen, then that's how you can be most successful, because every situation is going to be a little different. But if you know how to execute to get to the process improvement and to get to a solution, then you're going to be the most effective leader out there. So that's what we're encouraging for you. And that's what we can provide to you if you are interested in that in any capacity.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, go to meinc.ceo as for the website. If you're on Facebook, check out the Level Up to CEO Facebook group to get more tips and tricks like this. So learn about who we are, what we're doing. If you're following on the YouTube channel, we'll be breaking down some of these videos a little bit more, the bite-sized chunks. So if you have a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, and we'll also have those on Instagram. So
good luck with your teams remotely. If you have any questions, we are available. We look forward to hearing about your success stories and your challenges and supporting you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Be posting those in the Facebook group. That's exactly what it's for. Perfect. All right. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.